Question about the minutes?
I move to approve it.
Second. No discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Could we have a motion to take old business number 1, the table and chair policy,
So
out of
moved.
order? Terry
Second.
Anderson is here to help us with that.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
All in favor of taking that out of order?
Aye.
Great.
So with that, I'd like the board to recognize Terry Anderson also. Should probably have some comments on this. We've got two things on the table and chair policy that I want to make the board aware of. If you pull up your little handout you received tonight. At the bottom of it, on the application for tables and chairs, there's a question asked that says, there's two things that are happening. One is the license commission being notified with a checkbox, so that make sure they get notified. And then the question asked, do you currently have an extension of premises to serve alcohol on city sidewalks as part of this application, or do you plan to apply for one in the future for one? This has come out because more recently some people have taken tables and chairs permits out and not told us of that intention, and therefore they don't have the barriers that are required by state law on the diagrams they give us. And it's actually raised kind of a little stink downtown with some businesses, because whether or not there has to be a serving aisle associated with that, which Terry has told me there isn't one required. They just have to be protected by a barricade when you're serving alcohol outside. So we're just trying to get it more clear up front, and with Mary Madura, who is secretary to the License Commission, that she's clear on when we give tables and chairs permit, whether or not they plan to serve alcohol and whether or not they actually have a license to do it outside. The second part that's changed is in the policy, page 3, item number 6. There was a business downtown that received tables and chairs permits for 2 businesses because he has block ownership of the block that he owns. That was the Toasted Olive and Fitzwillies. So we cleared up the language, excuse the extra R in there, but basically that each business will be required to take out a tables and chair permit, and wouldn't be to a block coverage, so that like the Dirty Truth and Lavera Cruzanza has same ownership of the building, but there's 2 separate businesses run by different entities. So we're just trying to clear that up. So I made these proposed changes for the board to review and discuss, accept or not accept.
I'd like to move approval of the changes.
Second.
Okay. Any questions about it or discussion?
It seems to fit right in with what I've been reading in the paper and what I've heard said, so I think it's a good move, good correction.
So the intention isn't that we would take any position on the alcohol, just that,
No,
assuming the liquor board has approved it, and then we just look at the barrier and say,
Right. It's basically 2 different entities doing 2 different things than the conversation that happened between us and the License Commission.
and are there clear written guidelines about the barrier?
There are from ABCC, yes.
Okay. Specifying details about it.
There just has to be some form of barrier, whether it be a rope or an actual metal barrier. There just has to be some physical barrier between the pedestrians and the tables.
So in the interest of clarity, do we have do we look at this, or
What
do we
they do
only?
is they do is submit a plan
Mhm.
that shows all the dimensions and details to make sure that they're in compliance with the board policy. And so with that now, they'd actually show the additional barrier and any new distances that would happen because of a physical device they're putting out on the sidewalk.
But if they're not applying for there seems to be a reference to future use.
Mhm.
So if at the time that they're applying, they don't have one, but they're thinking about doing it in the future, when they want to modify that, they have to come back and visit us?
They would have to come back with a new revised permit, or not a permit, but a schematic for us to look at. And that's exactly what happened. Was the business downtown applied for tables and chairs. We gave them the tables and chairs permit, and then we found out a week later that they were in the midst of applying for an extension of premises, and we didn't know anything about it.
So if you had like those little poles like you see at Harrell's with the little pull-out thingies, that's sufficient?
That's a barrier.
Okay. All right.
No invisibility cloak.
Crime scene. Okay. All in favor of approving these changes?
Aye.
Great.
That's awful easy, Gary. You can.
I think the suggestions and what you adopted is fine. I think it's important to collaborate and to communicate back and forth with the two boards, because it has created a problem. The one point that I would add that hasn't been discussed is that there's some worry that with the addition of the barriers, and the ABCC regs don't specify any dimensions or distances or serving aisles or any of that. It's very vague guidelines. And now those guidelines, at the License Commission, they decided at their last meeting that those guidelines would now be attached to every extension of premises permit, which previously they were not, so that the applicant is clear that they're required to install a barrier. The trick is whether or not then it's going to cause some even existing businesses that have tables and chairs to be in non-compliance with your dimensional requirements. And I guess we need to look at it on a case-by-case basis, but I guess my request to you is there a way that if there's a problem that you could take a second look at the dimensions and see, is there a way to move newspaper boxes? I mean, it would be a shame for people not to be able to have tables and chairs. And I don't have a specific instance where I know for sure that's going to be a problem. I'm just concerned that it could be a problem.
Jim?
Yeah, Terry, we have been known as a department to cooperate with the businesses downtown to look at waste baskets and just the barriers that you're talking about, because the driver in this whole thing is accessibility and the handicap accessibility,
Yes.
so that people can get through these areas if they're in a wheelchair. So we've looked at all that every time we go down, I think.
Well, I appreciate your willingness to be flexible and to look at it case by case if something arises as an issue. I appreciate that. Thanks. Thanks for moving it up on the agenda. I appreciate it.
Now, I see there's some other people here. I wondered which items you're here to, what are you interested in?
Fifth Avenue, sidewalks, or parks.
Okay. I have it and I lost it.
Number 2.
Okay. And is that true for
Yes.
all of you? Why don't we take that also?
I move that we take item number 2
Second.
under new business.
Okay. All in favor of doing that?
Aye.
Great.
So what happened was I was approached by Paul Spector back, Councilor Spector back, actually doesn't have a date on it, to go out and look at 142 Franklin Street at the intersection of Fifth Avenue, and received an additional letter dated June 20th from Kathleen Becker, Linda Hagen, and Donna Park. I went out there with Richie Parcelletti, who was our highway superintendent, last Tuesday or Wednesday, and looked at it. And basically, the tree belt is built up high enough now that the sidewalk can't drain off of it. So the work that would need to be done to fix it is basically tear down the tree belt, regrade it out to the street so water can flow off the sidewalk. There's some other problematic issues with the sidewalk though too, is that the tree has actually buckled the sidewalk, which I think is probably attributing to the issue during the wintertime. And it's a healthy city tree, so we're not likely to remove the tree, but the roots are moving the sidewalk. It's originally a concrete sidewalk and had an asphalt overlay on top of it. I don't know when. The other concern I had about it, if we did do the regrading out there, I think the snow belt is going to keep the water in there also. So even if we do a fix out there, I think the snowbank is going to create the same issue during the winter again. And you were the ones that wrote to me about the 3 inches of ice you had this past winter out there and trying to get it out. I assume you had a snowbank alongside the roadway also, and it's probably attributing to the issue. So, we've looked at it. I've told Richie, I think, these are some of the fixes, but during the winter time, I'm not sure if that is going to be a fix at all. If we did regrading out there and try to do part of the green belt or pull it down so it can free drain itself.
So do you have a recommendation or?
Well, what I sent back to Paul Spector, Councilor Spector, was that basically that we would address it, but it's on our list of things to do. And when it'll get done, I don't have a date. Is it next month or 3 months from now?
Yeah, I did go down and look at that, yeah. when I saw the letter from Donna. And I certainly agree with you, but I'd also like to add that, let's face it, gentlemen, we haven't touched sidewalks in years. And the sidewalks in this city are atrocious, along with our streets. And somehow, this Board of Public Works has to address streets and sidewalks and traveling conditions for not only the walking public, but for the driving public. I know Amherst has floated a big bond issue to do streets and sidewalks, and I think that we should be pushing to try and get that kind of money for the city of Northampton to do just the same thing.
Well, in the capital plan that was just passed by the city council, there is funding starting in FY14 to supplement our Chapter 90 funds, just so the board is aware of that. It starts off small, projected at $500,000 the first year. I think within FY16 it grows to $1 million. And we get a little over $800,000 a year from Chapter 90 funds, and they typically go to strictly street work. We really haven't addressed sidewalks in a really long time because of our shy of staff. Since 2002, we lost a number of our staff members that haven't been replaced.
I gotta agree with Jim that I see people walking in the street because the sidewalks are so lousy that they don't want to trip, they walk in the streets, and I think we've got to find a solution. It's just been miserable. It's bad for bikers, it's bad for the pedestrians, it's bad for the cars. Can we find out some information a little bit more about how Amherst floated their bond? And
Sure.
because that'd be I know that we've been salivating about it since we heard about it.
The streets over there are amazing. I mean,
I know, I
I
was
swear
over
they've
there
done every
last
street
night.
in town.
Well, it's,
Not quite.
you know, it's a real joy to be over there driving.
Could we talk a little bit more about Fifth Avenue before we go to Amherst?
I was
Just about-
just asking about
right.
finding the funding source is the issue here. Is
Right.
that there's only so much money to take care of drainage and streets and sidewalks.
Right. We're looking for a short-term fix. We'd love it if the street, all the sidewalks got done on the street, because if you go further down the street, you know, the sidewalk is even more buckled in other places. And it's a very short street, but it's a street that's traveled by a lot of people because people travel synagogue and YMCA. They use our street all the time. And that's one of the reasons that we've worked so hard to try to keep that sidewalk clear. We're worried about somebody hurting themselves because school kids use that, walking to Jackson Street and going to the YMCA. And there's only one way we would find out if this kind of fix would work, and that would be to do it and then look at it. But I do have video, if anybody wants to see it, of the way it looks in the wintertime. And what's interesting in the video is you can see there we are with our measuring stick trying to show you how deep the water in the ice actually is as we're trying to deal with it. It's so thick that we can't, you know, we'll put chemicals on it, we'll chop it, and then it refreezes whatever we've chipped away. But you can see that the rest of the street sidewalks are dry. So it's true that the tree belts, the snow banks will keep some of the water in and keep it from draining. But it's very particular to that area that we're flooded, and you can see in the video camera, you can see all the way down the street, the rest of the sidewalks are bone dry on that particular day. So there's something particular to that section that's keeping it from draining, and I think it might be what you were talking about.
Just looking at it, I mean, it does have positive drainage, but the tree roots keep some of it in. And like I said, the higher grass belt is keeping a lot in also.
Another factor in the wintertime, I actually haven't looked at this, so I'm hesitant to say a whole lot about it, but I just know in the area where I live, we have similar problems with the sidewalks. And then in the wintertime, where the sun shines, has a great deal to do with what sections of sidewalk dry and what sections freeze. And so it can make a big difference just from block to block in terms of the amount of light that gets there.
It's true, and we're on the sunny side of the street. So it's like there's something happening there. I mean, we lived on another street, and we saw that all the time, that, you know, we were on the shady side and it wouldn't happen, but we're on the sunny side. So, I mean, we've been looking at it for a couple of years, trying to figure it out. I mean, this winter we did science projects on it. We had kids out there with tubing trying to figure out, can we suction the water out? Like if we melt it fast enough, and then if we have tubing going into the drainage, into the street, we'll go over the tree belt and get suctioned out. I used
The
my
answer was partly yes.
I used my shop vac to try to vacuum out water, and 5 gallons is not very much water. I drag it, try to dump it, so we'd appreciate whatever help you can give us.
Just so the board knows, in the past we relied on CDBG money for sidewalks here and there. I'm not sure if this area would be eligible or not. The other part of it is CDBG money is dried up extensively, especially money that came to the DPW to do projects like this, because they had a loss of, I think, 16% funding this past year. Also, there's capital improvements money let go in FY06 and FY07, if I remember correctly, and those were dedicated to priority sidewalks that were designated by the Transportation and Parking Commission, such as the Hatfield Street sidewalk, the Bridge Road sidewalk, things of that nature. And we have about, I think, 70,000 left on that, which is going to do the last sidewalk that they requested, which is the link on North Elm Street from Bridge Road down to Hatfield Street, past the cemeteries. So just so the board knows where our funding sources have been in the past for sidewalk work.
So the real solution would be to raise the sidewalk a few inches so it drained toward the adjacent driveways?
It'd be probably cheaper to tear down the green belt a little bit and reseed it than putting that much asphalt in. I mean, it's a sizable difference.
So the staff has no recommendation at the moment?
We've put in our list of
Okay.
everything else we have in our work order system to do. The highway superintendent's seen it. He thinks there's maybe a fix to it, but he's still concerned about winter time, whether or not it's actually going to free drain itself again to the snowbanks.
Yes.
I live at the intersection of Franklin and Fifth Avenue, and I've lived there quite a while, and it's been an endless problem every winter, and I'm worried to death that someone is going to get hurt and that there will be an accident on the street, because there are a lot of young children using that route to get to Jackson, and there's a lot of people in general going to the Y. And it's not that we're not trying very hard to deal with the problem ourselves. I mean, it probably would look like a frill because it's a little street and you've got much more important things to do. And I respect the fact that you take good care of the city and that the DPW has done some wonderful work for this community. Thank you for that. It's just that it's a terrible worry every winter. Every day you have to go out and see what's going on and try to find some way to put that blue sprinkly stuff down or try and get rid of the water depending on how much there is. It doesn't go away endlessly from the big, once the winter really sets in until the end.
We also have one resident on our street who, he'll be 98 this winter. He'll be 97, and he stopped driving a couple years ago. He lives by himself, and he walks to Stop and Shop to get his food. And this past winter, he was saying to us, that he couldn't do it because of the sidewalk. He's afraid to walk in the street. And we do some shopping for him, but he also wants his independence, and we're concerned about him also.
Well, so we may not have a solution for you tonight. Sounds like Jim is going to go take a look at it.
I did.
Oh, so
I've been
do
there.
you agree that
I
the
agree.
drainage is...
It's in a position that needs help. And I think Ned has explained, there's a lot of them in the city. I have the same condition in front of my house, but this is an existing problem. It's something that frustrates us very much, and they certainly do need help down there.
So, no immediate schedule for tonight. I'd suggest you give the department a couple of months. It'll still be warm weather, and check back with Ned or with Jim.
Yeah, we wouldn't seed anything till fall time anyways. The growing season's over right now for fresh new grass. So if anything, it'd be a fall project, September, early October at best.
Okay. So could you check back then?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for coming
Nobody
in.
wants to see the video, it's a quality.
Put it up on YouTube.
Paul has it, doesn't he?
I sent it to Paul, yeah.
You can send it to me.
Thank you.
Okay, okay, I'll do that. Do you want to give me your email?
Sure.
I'll send it to.
Do you want to put any questions?
Okay.
Got it?
The before and after you fix it.
City government work.
The videos are powerful. I had a funny experience of sending a video to Kohler because my bathtub wouldn't work with the new drain. And they watched the video and they said, "Oh, we're so glad you sent it. The engineers forgot to think about that there would be water in the tub. And the weight of the water is what's keeping the drain from opening." So
It's true.
it was a new drain, so a new design. So thank you very
All
much.
right. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to go into executive session to talk about an amendment to the Amoresco contract. Is that correct?
We're going for legal matters, discussion of contract interpretation.
All right.
Make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss legal matters as they relate to the contract implementation for Amoresco.
Second.
MJ?
That was fast.
Yeah, it's not.
That 18-minute gap.
All right. So it's been moved and seconded that we approve the amendment to the Amoresco contract. And no discussion. All in favor of approving the contract?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Excuse me, is it open to the public to know what was the amendment to the contract?
We could tell you maybe, but then we'd have to kill you.
Well, then you'd finally get to live out that lifelong dream, Terry, right?
I'm ready to go anyway.
I think we should
Yeah.
just outline it.
We have been struggling with Amoresco, the company that has the contract to burn the methane, the waste methane, and use it to generate electricity. We've been struggling over the terms of the original contract, and our attorney has worked out a resolution that everyone is reasonably happy with, and we're ready to re-sign the amendment and get back to work. The core of the dispute was how much money was due the city and how much could they keep.
How much do we get to keep?
We get more than we were going to get before. Okay, so that's all set, and we'll sign that. And next is change order number 3 to contract. Just let me scan down here. I don't think there's anything else that's
Controversial.
yeah.
No.
There's no one here for Pulaski Park.
Popular.
And Karen, are you?
I'm here for the smart bag
program.
update.
Item 3, old business.
Yeah, maybe.
Why don't we take that out of order?
Make a motion that we take the SMART program out of order.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Well, as you know, I picked a really good time to be away for 2 weeks.
You did. Tell us about the trip.
Denmark, it was great.
Yeah.
Really great. So, Waste Zero, the bag vendor, is replacing all of the bags at no cost to the city. That's the small, medium, and large bags. The medium and large bags will be in the stores on Friday. Those stores are Big White, Cumberland Farms, 2 locations, State Street, Stop and Shop, Cornucopia, Walgreens, River Valley Market, DPW, and Mayor's Office. Actually, those last 2 are just DPW will have all 3 sizes of bags for exchange.
On Monday?
They'll-
On Monday?
They'll be there. They'll be in they'll be received by the stores on Friday. Next week, we'll be adding Jim's Variety and Sam's Food Store up in Florence, which will bring it to 11. And then there's 3 stores that are kind of asking for customers to demand them. So if you go to 7-Eleven, Cereos, or Foster Farrar, please ask for the bags if they're carrying them. And so that would be 14. And then Staples and Walmart, basically because they're corporate and, they may take a long time, and we may find that with 14 locations, we really don't need them. So we'll see how that goes. The stores that are not participating are the 2 CVS stores, not because they don't want to, but because their insurance requirements for vendors are just way too high, and the city isn't going to increase our insurance for their purposes. The Northampton Market on Old South Street, Z-Mart, which is down the road here on Locust Street, and Florence Hardware. So they basically all just said no from the beginning. Just so you know, I don't know if you've seen the new bags, we do have them in. We had to increase the mill for the large bags from 1.5 to 1.9, which Waste Zero gave us at the same cost, but the next time we order, they'll be going from 27.5 cents a piece to 0.3146 per bag, which will translate into an additional cost of roughly $4,000 a year for going to the larger, heavier mill. We're still doing a lot of outreach. Did a community TV spot today. We've got the sandwich boards and posters. Gazette ad is, we have an ad that's going into the Gazette for free. And I doubt they'll run any more press releases because they've been covering it as well as they can. It's on the DPW blog and the website. I'm working with the senior center to give them some extra signage because we have so many seniors using the transfer stations. And all the stores have been given signs that say, official vendor of Northampton Smart Trash Bags, and also smaller signs that they can use at the cash registers. I know you had a question about the bag color. It's partly because the state contract requires a 30% recycled content that it's very difficult for them to control the hue of the bag, apparently.
The sample you brought in, I wasn't here for the color decision, but my impression was it was going to be a dark blue for the, and what we got was more like Jim's shirt.
Yeah, you're right, it was not dark.
And we were looking at their sample.
That's right. The next time I'll bring their color chart, which actually I looked at again, and blue is actually a range that, from, there's a range of like 5 different colors. If you order blue, you're going to get one of those. And I was more concerned about having them the same color between the 3 sizes. I think if we're going to continue to use Waste Zero and the state contract, because of the recycled content, we're not going to have a standard color all the time. It's just part of the, I've been told. Yes.
State low bid isn't always low bid.
Yes.
You want to make sure you check with everybody else.
We actually did that before we ordered from Waste Zero. Here's an interesting news flash. South Hadley, who started on July 1st, and Sandwich, Massachusetts, which also started a program on July 1st, are recalling all their bags.
Same vendor?
Yes. So we apparently, in the 8 years
We're
that
first to fail.
now the 8 years that Waste Zero has been doing business, Northampton was the second time they've ever had a problem at all, and South Hadley and Sandwich makes the third, fourth.
Yeah.
So, just one thing I'm still concerned about is the accounting. I mean, we had 10 stores that had them on the shelves, and
they've been called and, we've been switching out bag stickers and bags here and sending them all back to Waste Zero. We're basically depending on them to do the accounting and make sure that the city is made whole. But while I was away, the president of Waste Zero and the regional salesperson, I call him, had a meeting with you. So there was a plan for that, but I just wanted to say that's still my major concern. And most important, I want to give some credit to all the DPW staff that held the fort while I was gone, because Deb Blazer and the office staff, the whole office staff had to, really be there. And David Folletta was excellent. And most of all, I want to thank MJ because she sounded the alarm and averted what could have been a complete disaster rather than a very difficult and confusing time. But I really appreciate your bringing it to our attention. And part of the reason that we didn't know about it, and now I understand, that the bags were not consistent. So some of them were fine, and those are the ones, some of the ones that we tested at first. But it became more and more apparent that even though they were all produced in one run, they were not all of equal quality. And Waste Zero, really confessed to that they were below standard. And obviously, if they have 2 other towns that are going through the same thing. But anyway, thank you, MJ.
I was glad to share my household trash with this staff.
And I also heard you say that you're increasing the millimeter width or weight of the bags. Was that in addition to hoping that they'll be consistent in their production this time? Or were you just thinking this would be an extra way to protect ourselves?
The president was looking at 2 issues. I mean, we were sitting here in the meeting, all of us poking and punching, and so he agreed that the material didn't seem to have the give that he would have expected. It was sort of brittle. It would go stretch just a little bit and then fail. So the idea of a thicker bag would be more substantial. But then there are also problems with seams and the overlap of the tie. I asked him whether he felt that the tie was something that, in his opinion, was going to be a problem spot. And he said, no, 60–70% of the bags they sell have the tie. And they don't have the capacity to make, I have a Glad bag here with the ears that you can tie, and they don't have the capacity to make that kind of a bag. So it's either just a plain thing with a little twisty or the drawstring. Did that sound right?
I think you pretty well covered it. It was a little difficult. We were asking a lot of questions about production quality control. At least David Folletta was in the meeting that we were at with Terry and Ned. I didn't walk away from the meeting with a clear understanding of exactly why there was inconsistent quality of the bags. We felt that asking them to produce a thicker, more heavy-weight bag would possibly solve some of the inconsistent quality issues with the bag. The president was very reassuring that everything would be fine and they'd make everything right, which is good. But I think we felt that was just a thicker bag would give us a little more safety factor in the inconsistencies in the quality. And at least the bag samples that they sent that Karen had out in the office there seemed a lot better, like a lot better. I was looking at them when they came in.
Have we tested them? Have we tested the samples that we got in and they meet the weight without issue?
Yes, we actually also reduced the weight limit on the large bag to 35 pounds because that actually, from 40, because actually that's what the bag stickers say right now is 35 pounds, so that was too much.
I was just wondering, given the liability of the company and their culpability in this, if there is any way that they have sent a letter of apology that we could publish in the paper as part of, to to make it clear that it was not a city problem, it was not a DPW problem, but it was rather a producer problem, and so something to the effect of having a press release with this letter of apology and noting that also South Hadley and,
Sandwich.
thank you, also had the problem, and that we were ahead of the game in preventing this from happening. So I just think that that would be a great
Because
marketing
they actually
opportunity.
did start the program on July 1st, so
Yeah.
it was much worse
Yes, yes, and
because
that's,
they had irate.
but I'm just saying,
customers.
doing some kind of marketing, so that people know what that we have been watching what we're doing. It was beyond our control, so I'm just gonna throw that out as a staff, and I do think staff.
Want to apologize first for missing the conference committee meeting. It just, last week it just didn't work out. Just wasn't to be. But I have one question. Could you explain the stores are doing the accounting?
My concern about that?
Yeah.
No, it's just that Waste Zero with FedEx has been with separate FedEx for pickup, separate FedEx for drop off. So there's, you know, all random, not cases necessarily, but like at Walgreens. I mean, they already took everything out of the case and they have it all loose. And also that we've been changing bags to stickers here and not even full rolls. And so it you know, and every package is worth $10. So, you know, we have no way of knowing exactly how many bags are out there. We don't, that's waste.
But each
Waste
store
Zero.
will pay Waste Zero for those bags, and presumably they'd be watching the inventory at least reasonably closely.
Yeah, but Waste Zero is giving the stores credits, and then it's unclear to me about the accounting.
Oh, but nobody has complained or come forward with
No,
it.
the retailers are fine.
Okay.
They're whole.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure what the city
Yeah.
is going to be.
But if there's a, you know, if they ordered 20 and then they give them 20, no matter what they returned, that's probably good.
Yes. But it's complicated when you
Yes.
multiply it by 20 retail, or 10 retailers
Yeah.
and.
Karen, one of the advantages of this of Waste Zero, as I recall, is that they're willing to inventory it and handle the bookkeeping and the fulfillment for the retailers. Are they the only company that will do that?
At this time, yes. On the same contract, but by November there may be another.
And is there a clear distinction between the new bags and the old bags? Meaning if I end up with both of them at my house at the same time,
You
it'd
would,
be
you
clear.
would definitely know the difference.
One will be thicker than the other.
Yeah. So we do see people using them. The medium-sized bags are the most popular.
Yeah, I can use the medium bags without a problem.
Okay, any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you find, I don't know, I know it's just switched over, but there were a lot of people who expressed, you know, there were people who expressed they weren't happy with it. And I'm just wondering if you've seen any kind of drop off in the amount of people.
I can answer that since Karen's been away and I'm here all day.
Sure.
At first we did have a lot of resistance, but the past few weeks have gone very smoothly and people are getting used to it, and we really lately are not having any problems at all.
Any positive feedback?
I've gotten some. I would say the discontent was days, not weeks.
Yeah, I think it was just implementing the new program and it was something different. But lately we have not had any complaints whatsoever.
And because it was implemented so rapidly, I mean between, you know, the beginning of April, actually mid-April by the time you put in the order and kind of the bags arriving and all that, was a very short period of time, mid-June. So it was a surprise to some people because in a way there wasn't a lot of advertising until we knew it was a done deal in a way, you know.
And people that don't understand how the program works are coming in here and asking us for an explanation. And, you know, we have the time to talk to them, so.
Any feedback from the gatekeepers?
Oh, they love it. They
Great,
love
oh,
it.
good, I'm glad to hear.
And you were asking about drop-off and permits?
Yeah.
We've already, the permit sale started on July 1, and we're already a third of the way through. We've done almost close to, well, 2,500 by this point, which is very good. And anybody who sees how busy it is out here, I don't think you could say that you can't witness any kind of drop-off at this point.
Okay? Everyone satisfied? Karen, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, now, change order number 3 to contract 96-11 for the Bradford Street Pumping Station evaluation, design, and construction to Kleinfelder SEA Consultants in the amount of $3,596.
Move approval.
This is a change order on the Bradford Street Pump Station project. The board had some discussion a couple of meetings ago about this amendment. And originally, there's, well, let me finish my thought on that. The last time the board discussed that, the board had requested that Kleinfelder SEA provide further breakdown of the costs of the amendment into different categories, being out-of-scope services that the city requested, and increased level of effort or assumptions that were changed that resulted in an increased level of effort for in-scope work that was done. So a few days ago, I received this breakdown from Vince Spada, who's here from Kleinfelder SEA, to answer questions. But Vin had sent that to me, and I reviewed it and passed it along to the board. It was an additional breakdown that you were seeking. There was one other change that happened in the amendment request since the last meeting, and that's I had asked SEA to add some time in there for resident inspection, to cover some time in the field when our inspector, Bob Melstrom, is going to be on vacation, so to make sure we've got continuity of coverage when Bob's out of town. And Vin added that back in our request, so it went from being a credit to the contract to an increase in project price of $3,596. So if you have questions about the table, I'd be happy to answer those. And obviously, Vin can describe a little bit more the additional services that were provided or the things that we'd asked them to do. Anything at all we want to discuss here?
What was your feeling about the breakdown?
I thought the breakdown was, what we had asked for in the format that we had requested, and the fees as they were broken down seemed reasonable to me in terms of the service that was provided for those tasks. So I was satisfied with the breakdown as it was submitted.
And these are all increase in work. Why? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
Well, there were a couple of, I was breaking it down into, the table breaks it down into three categories. City requested out-of-scope work, so items that were specifically not included in their original contract. And then items that were changed assumptions due to different conditions at the project site or increased effort that was necessary to do the in-scope. So that was sort of how they broke this down. There was a number of things that were done, and we'd go through each task, but what was happening is the project design was being done under a very tight time frame because we were under pressure to get the project up to bid because we had the More Jobs grant that required that $1.125 million in grant money needed to be expended by June 30th of this year. So things were moving quickly, and what we were finding once the design started was that there were a number of things that were coming up that were out of scope. So SEA dealt with things like dealing with Coca-Cola impacts on the pump station flows, on the sewer, DCR easement issues, the location of the pump station, the fact that we don't own the property that the pump station is on. There were a number of things that were coming up seemingly every day, and we were just asking SEA to take care of these things so we could get the plans out and the construction, documents on the street. So there were a lot of things that were coming along, and it wasn't really until we came up for air and we were getting ready to bid, we had a discussion with SEA, and they said, we've been providing a lot of services. A lot of these services were out of scope, and we need to have a discussion about the fee associated with the services. And then I think the other key aspect of it was related to certain aspects of design there were complicating factors related to the geology of the site. After site borings were done, the site is a very, very soft clay material, very low blow count, that posed some challenges for the design, for both the design of the pump station in the ground and then for plans for sheeting and shoring during construction. And there was more.
But wasn't that all done before the price was?
The borings weren't done before the borings were part of the design contract, so they didn't have the boring information when they originally provided their design proposal. So the information came in with very low blow count material, and as I mentioned, the geotechnical and structural aspects of the pump station were more complicated and challenging to design because of those field conditions that were found. So that's reflected in some of the design tasks, and it's also reflected in some of the construction services related tasks where they're currently expending more money than budgeted on shop drawing review, in particular for the sheeting and shoring submittal from the sheeting contractor. They've gone back, I don't know, 4 or 5 times at this point, reviewing the calculations for the shoring that's supposed to hold up the excavation. Well, this is about a 40-foot excavation in loose clay, very soft material, so it's a dangerous project if it's not done right. And they're doing due diligence on our behalf related to those shop drawings, and it's gone, like I said, 4 or 5 times around, which is certainly a lot more than they had budgeted originally for almost standard construction type project. We've got better soil conditions. That's one quick shop drawing and they're done. So I think those were some of the key factors that that add cost on the job.
So that's under the category of increased effort.
Right. So under task 3 near the bottom, increased effort construction services is related to.
Well, I think that increased effort is more on the overall complexity of the project.
But you've divided it into changed assumptions.
Right.
The first one is city requested 32,000 or something. So all right, so
Yep.
Great, done deal. Or you got my vote anyway.
Okay.
Second one is changed assumptions.
Right. So in the providing the scope of services, the scope was based on assumptions of whatever, that we would just be looking at replacing in kind, the same size, the same site, same flows. And as Jim said, once we got into it, the site, we had to look at 2 other sites because we didn't own this site, so that was changed assumption. So now we've increased that scope based on that. Coca-Cola changed. We had to go investigate with them, meet with them, determine what their processes were. Again, changed assumptions in our scope. It was in the scope, but certainly the magnitude of the effort required was changed because of the assumption. So if we assumed that we were going to do 1 site, and we ended up doing 3 sites. We assumed we're going to have the same Coca-Cola flow. We had modified Coca-Cola flow. That's what the changed assumptions were.
Whereas increased effort is...
Increased effort is we sort of underestimated what we were going to be getting into. We provided the scope before the conceptual design was done, so we had an idea of a typical level of effort that we normally would encounter in this type of thing. When we got into it, because of all the changes, complexities, that level of effort was inadequate, and so that's why.
I'd be interested in knowing whether these cost requests cover all the overruns that SEA is experiencing. Are there any overruns that you took a look at and decided to absorb?
Yes. The one on item 9, which was the NEPA amendments, we had an overrun of about $16,000 there. That number represents strictly our cost and no profit on that. There was some discussion with Jim about not really doing what MEPA had. We had met with MEPA. MEPA requested a laundry list of things. There was some discussion that we didn't adequately address that laundry list of things, and so we agreed to reduce that effort, that amount.
The 16 or the profit on the 16?
The profit on, well, the 16 is just our labor, so that we deleted the profit from that.
But did you feel it should have been in the original contract?
No, because I think what happened was they had scoped doing an environmental notification form with NEPA, and then we had a pre-application meeting in Boston with NEPA staff, and in that meeting they told us what should be in the document, but then when SEA prepared the draft document, it didn't hit everything that the people in Boston were looking for. So they had to add, basically what happened was the people in Boston said that they wanted the impacts of the Coca-Cola facility expansion to be included in this application. And the original scope of the application was to simply look at the pump station, if I'm recalling this
That's
right,
correct,
from
yeah.
a few months ago. So it really almost doubled the effort and required more coordination with Coke, because we needed to get a lot of technical information from them about their additional product line, their additional treatment system, their additional flows, their schedule, the impacts of their project, so there could be cumulative impacts of the pump station and Coke would be in this one application. So there was a lot more effort that was put in, and there was no way of knowing that until we had that meeting with the MEPA staff in Boston. So it just, that's a situation where that's a changed condition that we had no way of anticipating.
And we agreed we didn't do it as efficiently as we could have, so that's why we agreed to reduce that cost.
I have a few more questions. We've probably touched on some of these explanations, but it would help me to understand it if we could hit them again. And it's really in the two columns that deal with changed assumptions and increased effort. Under the preliminary design, there are two tasks that seem to deal with alternative pump station sites evaluation. Could you talk about what you had to do under those two items that contributed to the net of $9,000 extra in changed assumptions?
Yeah, well, on the first one, the site feasibility evaluation, because there was a question as to whether or not the existing site could be used, we had to identify alternative sites. And in that identification process, we had to identify it, we had to configure it, lay out pipes, and then do preliminary cost estimates on each site, and then evaluate that, and prepare that in a memo as to which would be the preferred site to do. So that's primarily what that first item consisted of. Looking at trying to develop existing information for topography, for slopes, for size of pipes, for connections, for layouts, that sort of thing.
And where were these sites located?
One was in the Rotary right outside of the Coke facility, and the second one was in the same vicinity as the existing site, but on a vacant lot. But it was up higher, so we had to look at grades and things and how that exactly would work, because we had flows coming in from the other end that were at a lower elevation. So it added some complexity to that. And then the pump station design criteria, that primarily had to deal with a lot of developing new peak flows to the pump station. Not only developing the existing, but looking at what Coke wanted to do now and in the future. And then we expanded that to say, well, what if there was more or different development within the industrial park that we're servicing, what would be the impacts of that? So we had to evaluate those and give a recommendation on that.
And you consider that work to be outside the original scope? Is
Yeah,
that-
the scope originally just said basically we're replacing in kind. One of the recommendations we had was that we wait on this, but replacing the pump station until we had more information, not only from this area, but citywide, to see how this pump station would fit in with overall new development as part of the comprehensive wastewater management plan. But because of the timing of this, the age of the pump station, and the fact that Coke was anxious to get going right away, there was risk involved with not replacing the pump station now. So that's why that was moved ahead there.
Can you talk some about the changed assumptions on design, final design, task one?
Yeah, the big one there was when we did the soil boring and found zero blow count on the soil, it changed a lot of things. It suddenly became from a simple excavation project putting in the pump station to now we've got some serious issues here about how do we support this structure on this type of material. It was a very changing of the whole game on that once we found that. And then but then secondly too, we were going to house the generator in a separate building, but because of wetland issues, which we weren't aware of in the start of it, the site was constrained as far as the footprint that we could have for the building. So now, with the way the site turned out, in order to house the generator, it required some not complex, but some significant looking at as far as the architecture of the roof, how the two roof pieces would connect and that sort of thing. So it involved that type of effort on that because of the shape of the lot that we were left with on that. So those were the two primary issues that resulted in that. Certainly the soil was the number one, but a secondary one was the shape of the lot.
And can you comment on the change in the permit requirement?
Yeah, the scope had a different permit, and I don't remember what it was.
I think it was a sewer extension permit.
Yeah, it was a sewer extension permit, and now, but after our MIPA meeting and with the DEP, they wanted this permit, which required some significant more information than we had originally anticipated putting together.
This looks like an item like perhaps the original estimate was on the low side to begin with.
It was, yeah, it was a
$23 for
very,
permit.
very straightforward, simple assumption, yeah.
And then the last one, and I know Jim touched on it a few minutes ago in his overall comments, but under construction services, you've identified two numbers for, one for changed assumptions and one for increased effort.
Right.
And I understand some of that's related to the geotechnical submittals.
The 9,000 would be related to geotechnical submittals and then also with the roof and the architectural reviews of those submittals.
And the increased effort, the 18,000?
Increased effort was simply more shop drawings. When we ended up with the final design, it was a little more complex than what we envisioned when we started. Originally, we thought simple pump station, simple package, we just replace, boom, and we're done. And when we got into it, by the time we finished it, as Jim noted, because of all the different things that were happening, the number of shop drawing submittals skyrocketed, and it required a lot of effort on our part, unanticipated.
So it would be fair to say you're satisfied, or do you have
Well,
enough information to think about it, or?
No, I think the presentation of the information is very complete. I mean, I had to do this myself. I watched others do it. I think the narrative where they provide the scope and then talk about the additional services is complete. So I think there's enough information here for me to review and understand this. These contracts, in my view, are reimbursement for the services that this firm provides. And sometimes that gets frustrating, and this is a case in point where it seemed to have gotten out of control for a number of different reasons. A lot of them were changes in scope that were to the city's direct benefit and our request, things that had been anticipated but were needed in order to implement the project. I mean, as you said earlier, those are easy to understand. The changed assumptions, I think there are a lot of valid reasons that support those. So I talked about this with Jim earlier this afternoon, and I think one of the key questions is the department satisfied with the level of service and the way this project's going? And if the answer to that is yes, I can see justification for supporting this change. I find it frustrating that we get faced with this after it's all happened. I know the staff was frustrated with the way that happened, and as we think about our relationship with SCA, we don't want this to happen again. And that message has got to come through. But they seem to have worked hard to provide justification for the changes.
Thanks.
One thing, you talked about talking with Coca-Cola and investigating the process that they were putting in and so on, which would determine the load that they were going to put into the pumping station. I'm very interested in the product that they're going to produce and where else they're producing this particular product in the United States. Do you know of where they're producing that product?
I have no information like that. No.
You don't have any information. And we don't have any information on that yet.
No.
What's your interest in that, Jim?
Well, I want to call the treatment plant where they are
Okay.
and find out
What's happening?
what's happening.
It's a
We
good
had-
question.
We had, that's a little peripheral to this, but when SCA was helping us with this, they were also doing a nitrogen study at the wastewater plant, and they provided some consulting assistance to us when we issued Coke's discharge permit for the plant. And the project manager that was working with Ben, Dave Michelson, had asked Coke for examples of other plants in the United States that were producing a similar discharge from a similar type of retreatment plant. And we were having some difficulty getting that specific information from Coke. And I'm not sure, I can't recall actually if Dave was ever successful, but we had asked for it, and Dave Michelson had asked for it a number of times because we wanted to know if what was being discharged from their pre-treatment facility would cause any upset with the type of aeration plant that we have. So,
Do we know what the product is?
We know what it is, but we don't know if it's being produced somewhere else. What is it? It's a
chilled
citrus
juice.
juice of some.
It's a chilled juice line they put on. Orange juice, pomegranate juice, and a number of different juices they're producing.
Does this situation give you any thoughts for future contracts? I mean, as you think back on it, is there anything we could have done on our end to?
well, I think Mike did a pretty good summary of of how we feel about it. Generally, he'd asked me earlier, were we satisfied with the service? Is the cost of the amendment commensurate with the services that were provided? I think the answer to those two questions is yes. Could things have been managed a little bit better in terms of notifying us early that we'd be happy to help you out with this service, but this is something that's clearly not within our scope, so that we're aware of these change orders when they're $5,000, not when they're $50,000 or $70,000. So I think just improvement in communications with the project management level people on the projects as they go is really critical on projects of this magnitude, because things can easily snowball into a situation where nobody's happy. And clearly there were a number of things that we had asked for that were provided in a timely fashion, and we were really happy with the service at the time. We would have been ecstatic if everything had been, up front to say, well, that's only $4,000, but it's not in the scope. So we need to take care of the paperwork and the contract, as we go. That way there aren't any tens of thousands of dollars of surprises as we move along. So, that level of communication, I think, is critical, and it's something that we'll be looking forward to working with SCA on as these projects move ahead, because it becomes a lot more difficult to go back in retrospect and look at what you've been doing over the last 6 months and try to recreate everything. And I think the other point that Mike made when I talked to him earlier was that when you identify work as out of scope, the minute it's out of scope, you can set up your accounting system within the company to account for the costs better for the out of scope work. So it's not as much of a, what's a changed assumption and what was out of scope and how do you account for that. You can set up your accounting system within your firm in order to track every hour that's put onto something that we specifically asked for that wasn't part of the original contract. So there are some things that tools that can be used to better manage projects, and on this one, on other projects with SCA, they've done a fantastic job. We feel like they're a top-notch company, and on other projects at the plant, we think they've done a great job. This one, we weren't quite as happy with, but the service was right, and I think the fee was right. I think just the way, we're trying to reconcile everything wasn't as good as it could be.
Would it make any sense as a matter of policy to have a timeline on change orders? Contractors required to submit change orders within 20 days or anything like that?
Yeah, I think it's, certainly.
I'm thinking policy.
Yeah. I mean, we can instruct all the firms that we work with that, if there's an out-of-scope item, you need to let us know immediately so we can take care of paperwork within 30 days or sooner. Some firms are actually, they blow me over immediately. If something out of scope, they want to contract.
So we could maybe have an agenda item for another day and talk about this?
Sure.
Okay. Great.
One of the benefits of that is it gives us the opportunity to decide if we really want them to do that item of work.
Right.
And it provides for a common understanding of the scope. We may think what we just asked for is in the scope, and the consultant thinks it's outside of the scope. And nobody knows that there's a misunderstanding until
the bill comes.
Yeah, until the bill comes, right.
Just a point of information. We, at the City Council, had approved a TIF, a tax incentive financing program for Coca-Cola. And in that TIF, the upgrade to this Perry pump station was outlined that Coca-Cola would do it. And so I'm wondering just exactly how much the city, minus the grant money, how much is the city spending on this totally? Because it was taken out of when we got a grant for whatever the amount of money was that we had to use by a certain date. All of this changed, but we had approved a TIF for Coca-Cola for the expansion of their facility, and they were obligated to make the upgrade to this facility. So I'm wondering just exactly how much money we're spending on this altogether out of the city's coffers.
Roughly about $1 million.
Wow.
We had a $1.125 million mortgage jobs grant. We're doing the final paperwork on it now. We have about a $60,000 balance remaining that we just weren't able to expend. I mean, the project is, it's not even in the ground yet. They're just getting ready to get going. So they covered design fees, they covered some permitting fees with National Grid, and any construction date. And our resident engineer was going down to the concrete precast facility, getting percentage completion of the pump station, materials stored down there, things of that nature to make that up. Overall, without this pending change order, I believe the project was about $1.9 million to $2 million total, including engineering, resident inspection, construction management, and construction itself.
The city of Northampton's piece of that is $1 million.
Approximately with design and the construction part of
I
it.
remember bringing you the copy of the TIF.
Above and beyond,
No, total cost.
but above and beyond the grant.
Above and beyond the grant is about $1 million.
Yeah.
Was my question. I remember when I had brought you the TIF and showed it to you, you had never seen it before at that point.
Yeah.
And this was already underway. And so somewhere I think there was a breakdown of communications, because I had mentioned to Terry Anderson several times that this is going to cost us a fortune. Here we are. So Coca-Cola was responsible for this in their TIF. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? So essentially, we,
I just want to, people know what a tip is. I haven't.
Same thing with financing.
We get a tax break from the city of Northampton,
Yeah.
you know, it's very little.
That was done and signed prior to us receiving the grant or after?
I don't know when you received the grant. I will have to dig that back up.
In September, I think, we received it.
Before that the TIF went through.
so round numbers, we're voting on a change order of $3,500, but what's happening under the surface is we have credits approximating $90,000, and they're raising their fee about $90,000. Plus the 3.
Yeah.
So we're waiving our right
That's-
to the credit, basically.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's right.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
Dan, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, then.
Okay,
You know, it probably bears saying, but we have no reason to have any qualms about the service you've done. From everything I've heard, people have been very pleased. Obviously, the accounting, I hope, there are lessons for you here also.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I've heard it, and I'm certainly going to take that back, and we're certainly going to make that a priority going forward. Absolutely.
Even this presentation, increased effort, changed assumptions, it's all fuzzy-wuzzy. Whoever worked on this, I think, could have done an even better job. Crisper, cleaner, more specific.
Hopefully we won't get to that
All right.
level again.
Well,
So that's
I'm
the
sure we
goal.
won't.
That's
Sure
the
we
goal.
won't.
All
Thanks.
right, thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Hey.
Contract for rehabilitation of Old Shepherd Road Bridge to Stantec in the amount of $33,700.
Move approval?
Second.
Actually, it's a contract for rehabilitation, it's for design and engineering analysis. So what's happened is the DPW was approached by the Leeds Civic Association. They'd like to rehabilitate what we know as Hotel Bridge up in Leeds. It goes between South Main Street and Water Street in Leeds. It's the old Pratt Iron Precipice bridge. It was built roughly 120 years ago or so. So we worked with the Leeds Civic Association, developed a co-application to the Community Preservation Commission, our committee, to receive funding for this initial phase of engineering analysis. We tried it last year, it was not awarded to us. This year they awarded us $35,000 to cover this fee. We went out for proposals. We got a proposal from Greenman Pedersen and for Stantec to do the work. Greenman Pedersen was, I think, $200 or $300 less, but the Stantec scope was much more inclusive of what they were planning to do for us. Out of that $33,758, there's a full 4-day inspection of the bridge by barge and on surface inspection. There's a metal examination. They're really looking at this bridge very closely because they want to make sure that the critical areas of it are not ready to fail before they go much further on that. It also includes meeting with environmental and historic commissions on this, so Conservation Commission, Historical Commission, and meetings with DEP, what kind of permitting would be required in case we do some kind of rehabilitation. They do a full capacity analysis of the bridge, basically what it currently can hold, and if they do some redecking configurations and so on, because that's why it's closed right now the decking's failing on it, and we closed it to all traffic. What that new rated capacity would be, and then they're doing a alternatives report. The Leeds Civic Association wants to use this for events. We're looking at using this for pedestrian and bicycle use only, never to be open to vehicle use again. We're also looking at as a potential link between Water Street Leeds, the Sawmill Hills Conservation Area, Buzani Beach, and whether or not we'll be able to get a link across a parcel that the city owns now along the Mill River and get it up to the existing rail trail. So we're exploring those things with Leeds Civic Association also. So this is, like I said, this is the engineering analysis to really kick this project off, and it is covered 100% by a CPA grant.
Two questions. For the $1,000, do you have to give that back to the CPA difference? Didn't you say the grant was for $35,000?
35,000, and so
Yeah.
if we have a small overrun, that's why I asked for 35 in case we have a small overrun, that we have up to that money to expend on it.
So this is just for the design, but some of the
This is for analysis,
analysis.
not design.
Oh, just analysis.
Just
not
analysis.
design. But if the analysis comes back and saying that it's safe and it's worth keeping, will there be more money spent on repairs so that it can be used by bicycles and pedestrians?
Well, we haven't even determined a funding source for it. The Mass DOT has taken off their inventory list at this point, since it's not open to vehicles and was never intended to do that going forward. So whatever we do, we're looking at actually rail trail grant money to do the links if possible and do the actual work on the bridge.
Okay,
if we
so,
can find
but what
that.
I'm getting to is that there wouldn't be any more expense for the citizens of Northampton on this, if even should the design, should the analysis show that there's a promise?
It all depends what the city wants to do. If there's no grants found for the next 5 years, is the city going to look at some funding mechanism through capital improvements to fix the bridge for $50,000 or $100,000 to make it usable again for whatever project they want to do? I don't have that answer.
Okay, but with the analysis, would there be an estimate of the future cost?
Yes. On the alternatives report, it looks at evaluating rehabilitation alternatives, preliminary cost estimates, and rehabilitation alternatives, in a meeting with the town to discuss those findings in preparation of the report. That's the final item in this.
And I ride my bicycle over that all the time. People walk on it. What will also come out of this is some determination whether that low level of use is safe.
Right.
You probably don't want 100 people out there for watching fireworks.
Well, what's happening is the corrugated metal decking's falling apart, and with it we're getting literally potholes down to the water below.
Don't cross it on the progress day.
No.
The idea is to restore it to some idea of maybe something that was period of that time, i.e. wood planks across, things of that nature, as they were looking at it.
Bridge of Flowers.
Yeah. All right, any further discussion? All in favor of approving the contract for engineering? Great. Contract for Kubota, a utility vehicle for the water department to Bacon's Equipment in the amount of $23,000.
Move approval.
Second.
This has been going on for a number of years of how to get our water department employees, especially our ranger, up into the watershed areas that currently never gets to see, or you spend a lot of time walking to get there. This is a four-wheel drive utility vehicle. It's not an ATV. You just actually see a picture of it here in the contract. And basically allow them to, the rangers, to get back out into the 3,000 plus acres of watershed land that we have in the Ryan, Mountain Street, and West Whately reservoirs. To be able to do, we actually have a foreman with 2 seasonals doing construction work up there. This could provide a buggy to get out further out back to do some erosion control projects, things of that nature. It's been on the wish list for a number of years. It actually was approved by the Capital Improvements Committee this year, as a number of other vehicles in our equipment replacement was.
So the money is?
Money is from the water department, but it was approved. What we do is we roll in all our vehicle needs into capital improvements, whether it's enterprise fund or general fund related, and the city council votes on it. Part of that, we had a request of, I think, $800,000 in vehicle replacement, and they approved roughly $300,000. This is one of them on the water department side. They approved the water department side and I believe $170,000 in general that we could use for parks, cemeteries, streets, drain division, things of that nature.
Was this bid?
Yes, it was. There was 3 bids. Bacon's Equipment in Williamsburg was the low bidder. The other 2 bids was Ahern Equipment and Leahy Equipment, $26,125 and $29,013.
Cool. All right, all in favor of approving the contract?
Aye.
Contract for sodium hypochlorite to Borden and Remington, the amount not to exceed $25,000.
This is our annual contract with the Water Department for water treatment plant. We did go out to bid on this. Borden and Remington was the low bid. High bid was 95 cents a gallon by Slack Chemical. We received 4 bids. Last year price was 0.5645 cents per gallon. So roughly went up 10 cents a gallon from last year.
Comments, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Contract for the bar rack replacement to Delray Contracting, the amount of $93,666.13. The bar rack is that thing that catches old boots and
Towels and rags and
Bikes.
grits, everything that comes into the inflow channel of the plant. This is part of the contract with SCA that you approved back in December or January of this year to get this work done. It was put out to bid, and they were the low bidder.
I don't know if it's got the
And an
recommendation.
occasional $20 bill.
really, that just slide right through?
Let's come up with the rack.
No. The other bids, I don't remember, I don't have them in front of me, but they were the low bid by, I think, a few $1,000s, and the high bid was a couple $100,000 to do the work.
Really?
It was, I mean, it's all spec'd out. So Delray, we have worked with them before. They actually did the effluent pump station for us last year at the wastewater treatment plant. And they did fabulous work for the department.
Did we have a cost estimate for this going into the bid?
It was over 100,000 was the cost estimate. Right, I think it was 110,000.
But we've worked with Delray
Yep.
contract before.
All right, all in favor of approving the contract?
Aye.
Great.
I'll just leave those here so you can sign at the end, or you want to pass all the books around now? It's your choice.
It must be, their law department must be driving around in Porsches. Some people have 2-page contracts and some people have.
This is the whole.
That's the whole construction contract.
Oh, that's everything, all right.
Specifications, everything.
All right, change order number 4 to contract 160-08 for landfill construction to B&M Excavating.
This is a change order to work with B&M Excavating. We had a couple of small construction projects that would need to be done with the landfill. One of them included repairing a small section of landfill cap that eroded due to a failed section of subdrain, so the crushed subdrain and some of the movement of some of the soil material on top of it. And we also asked them to install 2 cooling outs on one of the gas air mains. So this work was completed as we'd requested, and this was the value of the work that was done.
Any questions? All in favor of approving the change order?
Aye.
Change order number 4 to contract 2609 for legal services to Anino, Draper and Moore in the amount of $15,000.
Move approval.
Second.
This is the work that we've been doing, trying to resolve the issues with Amoresco. This is the fourth amendment, and I believe correctly that we're about $7,000 into this at this point. So there's not enough money to pay what we're going to get for a new bill, so we need another change order.
So this will probably be it.
I hope so.
What was the total so far?
Well, for this particular company was $77,000, not to exceed. We expended about $50,000 Mackey, Shane, O'Brien prior to this.
All in favor of approving the change order?
Excuse me, can I just clarify those numbers? You said it was 50,000 for the Mackey Shea O'Brien
That's correct.
and 77,000
That's correct.
total? Or
That's correct.
okay,
Total.
thanks.
On top of the 50.
That's correct.
100, yeah.
Change order number 1 to contract 351-11 to Gomes Construction for the Con Street reconstruction for the amount of $7,000.
Concrete reconstruction where?
Con Street.
Con
Con
Street.
Just so you know, this has nothing to do with Con Street, but it's a contract that we have working under contract with the city. We had a problem down on our Mill River flood control project where we had some vandals remove very large riprap and roll it down into the river. And so this contract is for him to come out with a backhoe with a thumb on it, pull all that riprap out of the river and put it back in place where it belongs.
Damage.
And with it, we had the police remove 5 tents and a number of homeless people living down there at the site.
What section of the Mill River?
Just below the bike path and back of the Smith College Physical Plant,
Oh, yeah.
between that and Texas Road.
Yeah.
How heavy are those?
I don't know how they moved them.
Yeah.
Some of them are very, very large rocks.
That's what I thought you was asking.
Very large.
All right, well, everyone
Made Sisyphus.
vote in favor of this change order?
Aye.
Contract for hydrants to Villano Brothers in the amount of $16,580.
Move approval.
This is the annual contract the water department does for hydrants as we replace them. We usually do 15 a year. They do hydrant replacements and also have a few in stock in case a car hits it here and there. So like I said, we had 3 quotes on this, and they were low bidder by $16.38. So it was a pretty tight bid this time around.
Wow. Did they do it last time as well?
Yes. Oh no, E.J. Prescott got the bid last time, and they were the second lowest bidder this time. High bidder was $17,713 by Waterworks Supply.
Just out of curiosity, what was it last year?
I don't have that information in
All
front
right,
of
I
me.
was done for, just curiosity.
I can't remember it.
Nominal memory here.
All right, so now we're voting on the contract for hydrants. All in favor of approving that?
Aye.
Okay, contract for the water treatment plant SCADA system to Aaron Associates in the amount not to exceed $24,999.
Move approval.
Second.
This is a contract with Aaron Associates for SCADA system support at the water plant. Aaron Associates was the firm that originally did all the SCADA design for the water plant. We kept them, well actually we had a contract with them last year to provide system support, and this is a contract for them to provide system support as we need it. Dave Sparks had requested 3 bids from firms on this, and Aaron Associates bid $100 per hour. Elm Electrical did not submit a bid, and a company out of Quaker Hill, Automatech, also submitted $100 per hour. And given Aaron Associates' familiarity with the system, they were proposed to be awarded the contract.
Jim, do we spend a considerable amount of money calibrating this system and so on?
It's really good to have somebody on retainer to do
Well, I agree.
and yeah, I would say, you know, 25,000 a year It's certainly money well spent. I think a lot of times what we've had with problems up there is some electrical storm issues will wreak havoc with the control sometimes. And, other problems will arise with the operation of the plant that our staff won't be able to resolve, and sometimes it's things that happen within the programming that need to be looked at.
Yeah, it really takes an electronics guy to do it.
It does, and they've done a really good job.
I don't think we spent anywhere near that last year, though. I think it was way under. I'm thinking 6 or 16.
I'm just
something
trying
like
to
that.
get a
It was
handle
way
on
under.
how
No,
much
it was
calibration
nowhere
they
near
would
that.
Yeah.
I remember, I looked it up, but I.
Well, as long as our superintendent of water thinks it's a well worth contract, I'm happy.
So all in favor of approving that contract for the SCADA system support?
Aye.
Contract for a radar path survey to Tata and Howard in the amount of $9,000. Is that radar looking into the ground?
This would actually be a radio path survey,
The
not a radar. We're going to do the radar path one maybe next year. We're going to start with radio. Move on.
I want you to explain the other one.
Back at the end of last year, we had received a letter report that was done for us by Tate and Howard that looked at capital improvements up at the reservoirs and the low-lift pump station in order to be able to measure flows and get information from remote locations to the SCADA system at the water plant. So they made a series of recommendations which totaled somewhere in the order of about $380,000 for capital improvements. And we had budgeted that money in this year's budget to do all the work. The first step of the work is this radio path survey. One of the reasons we wanted to move ahead with the radio path survey is that we've been having some communication problems between the low-lift pump station, the Mountain Street Reservoir, and the water plant. After electrical storms, sometimes things happen, it knocks out certain aspects of communications at the pump station. Tate and Howard felt that going to a radio communication rather than a hardwire communication between those facilities would help improve the reliability of the pump station. It's a real problem now because if we have a bad, if we have an electrical storm or something that goes through, then that can impact the operation of the pump station. So we wanted to move ahead with the radio path survey, and that's what the contract is for, to undertake that. The other work that Tate and Howard had recommended in their December 2010 letter report, we hadn't decided to move on that yet. We had a request for proposals on the street for a water consultant to do a sort of stem to stern asset management plan on the water side. And our intention was that once we picked a consultant through that process, that consultant would be the one to implement these other recommendations. So we're holding off on some of the other work until we fully vet the proposals that we just received.
Is the hardwire communication as recent as the water treatment plant?
It was installed as part of the treatment plant.
Is that unusual that it's causing problems already, that we're thinking of bypassing it instead of repairing it?
We have not been able to solve the issue with electrical. We've done we did a number of improvements after the, looking at all types of different surge protection and all types of different things that are, that might solve the problem. And the reliability has improved somewhat, but we're still having problems during storms when things will, have problems, because of electricity. There's also a stray voltage problem out there that we haven't been able to solve. Is I think that 50 volts of stray voltage that can't be tracked down, and so there's a number of issues, and we feel it's related to the control wiring, and that if we can get that out of the ground, that's going to help with the reliability.
I'm not an expert in this, but I mean, what about, and it might be a lot more expensive, but it seems like there could be telephone or satellite communication used instead of radio. I mean, I don't know, it might be more expensive, but.
Radio is pretty typical in the industry to use for communications between facilities and pretty cost effective and reliable. So with, Tate and Howard is recommending that. In their letter proposal, they offered to also take a look at fiber optic communication between the two, which had been suggested by somebody else as a possible means of improving communication. So they were going to take a quick look at the cost for fiber optic, but they were very comfortable with different ways of using radio frequency to accomplish this.
Fiber optic makes a lot of sense. It should be good for years and years to come. They'll handle much higher throughput than radio. I mean, once you get a couple of strands of fiber in, game over.
Yeah, the fiber optic may make more sense between the pump station and the plant. The radio survey is actually going to go all the way up to the Ryan Reservoir. It'd be too long of a run to use fiber optic for that. If we put metering kits in and 4 meters up there, we'll want to use radio to get back to the plant that way and all. So the radio path survey was to look at the low-lift pump station and also all the way up to the Ryan Reservoir. So, maybe fiber optic for that one run, will end up being a better recommendation there than looking at first.
So there'd be intermediate measuring points? Or just intermediate relays for radio?
Two lines on the left.
We don't know. I think the study is going to tell us exactly what we need for.
That's what I signed.
Okay, so this is a vote to see if you'd like to approve the contract for the radar path survey. All in favor?
Aye.
It's a resounding yes.
You should be able to read that so well.
I was waiting for him to say it.
I'm sorry, I slipped my mind. Change number 7 to contract 19610 for the Spring Street and Clark Street.
No, we missed one, number 14.
Contract for the flow control valve design to Tate and Howard in the amount of $7,500.
Move approval.
Second.
This is a contract with Tate and Howard to do the design and construction assistance for the replacement of a valve on the raw water main feed from the Ryan Reservoir into the water plant. We've been having reliability problems with the valve that was installed when the plant was built on this raw water feed from Ryan was a butterfly valve, and it's also being used to reduce the pressure in the incoming flow into the plant. And what we've been finding is that because it's the wrong type of valve, its function is degrading over time, and it's causing problems with the operation of the water plant. If this valve fails, we won't be able to get water from the Ryan Reservoir into the plant. And given the reliability issues that we just talked about with the low-lift pump station in Mountain Street, we're anxious to get this valve replaced by removing the butterfly valve and replacing it with a pressure-reducing type valve. Ned and I have had discussions with Joe Cook about doing emergency procurement to do this valve replacement, which has been approved. So this contract basically is for Tate and Howard to do design schematics and valve design for this pressure-reducing valve, and also to help us get 3 quotes from contractors and to oversee the construction of the replacement of the valve.
If I may, you're talking about 3 quotes. What do you expect the cost of that replacement to be?
It's going to be about $50,000.
About $50,000. I'm very surprised that they're using a butterfly valve for pressure control, because the minute you start to restrict, it's a high wear and tear.
Right, and that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
We're seeing cavitation because of that, and it's...
Sure.
And did you say earlier on this was an existing valve, or this is also new as of
This
2
is
or
a
3
valve.
years ago?
Yeah, this is a valve that was installed when the plant was built.
Who was the designer?
Metcalf and Eddie Cohn was the designer.
But it's unusual to use a butterfly valve to reduce pressure?
It is.
I'm amazed that they let it go.
We had a discussion with Joe Cook about having a discussion with Eddie Cohn about this about the design issue associated with the selection of a butterfly valve for this application.
So is that discussion ongoing?
The discussion will be ongoing, we haven't started it yet.
I'd be interested in knowing how many years that engineer was in business, a particular designer.
Mike?
Is this the location where we considered putting in the hydro facility?
It is in that the hydro facility was going to be outside the building. This valve is inside the building, but it's right within that general vicinity.
The hydro facility would do the same job? And we're not pursuing the hydro facility because of the payback turned out to be fairly poor?
It's 26 years, if I remember right.
We throw in 50,000 extra, will it look better?
So 1.5 million or something?
Oh, never mind. Never mind.
It's not that.
Move the question.
Okay, all in favor of approving this contract with the flow control valve design?
Aye.
Aye. Say aye. And the best firm for designing the valve is the same firm that's best for doing a radio survey?
They do the same work.
I feel like they're talking about it.
And they do roofing and,
Yeah.
all right.
It might be radar next year for us too, the last one.
Okay, change number 7 to contract 196.10 for the Spring Street and Clark Street well pumping stations to Bay State Regional Contractors in the amount of $9,400.
Move approval.
What are we gonna get for that $9,400?
We are going to get pressure grouting at the Clark Street well to seal water leakage from a crack in the concrete floor about 5 inches from the wellhead, including seepage between the outside of the well casing and the concrete floor. In order to provide access to these locations, the new pump will need to be raised and the discharge pipe temporarily removed. After completion of the grouting, the pump will be lowered and the discharge pipe reconnected. We're having a problem at the Clark Street well with a lot of seepage coming up through the floor and along the well casing, which is causing, there's a lot of water, for one thing, and it's causing almost a constant discharge from the sump pump.
Is that something new?
It is, it's something new. We didn't have this problem before,
Yeah.
but there are cracks in the floor. It's an old station, and we need to do something because the pump, the pump is running continuously, and the dry well that we installed is overflowing because of the amount of volume it's taking, so we need to try to get it sealed up.
So is it groundwater being pushed up? I mean, is the top of the well not sealed against?
It's groundwater. It's not. It is groundwater coming out. There's a crack in the floor where it's coming up, and it appears like there's also some grout that needs to be placed along the well casing or the well casing in the floor meat.
So the pressure is coming from the well,
right,
seeping out, and then
right.
Okay. All discussion, questions? All right. Everyone in favor of approving change order number 7?
Aye.
Request for permission to occupy Pulaski Park on Sunday, October 2nd by ServiceNet. They're going to host a shelter Sunday.
Yeah.
That's earlier in the month than they usually do it.
Let's say no this year.
Well, that'll wake the group up. Put her on the autopilot there for a while.
Right,
I think it's
usually
towards the end of October.
It's usually the weekend after,
Ah, he doesn't air it here.
these are it.
Should we tell them that we'll approve it if they put it on an appropriate date?
Never gonna live
I'm
down
just
Marine
curious
Valley, am I?
why.
Is there a reason for the big change? You don't know.
Has the mayor agreed to
Waive the
support-
fees?
Yeah. Thank you. I move approval?
Second.
Now that motion does not include, they requested a waiver of the fees.
That's correct.
I would make a motion to agree, to waive the fees.
Because they're,
The mayor has approved.
oh,
Service
yes,
net.
okay.
I asked
It's
that.
a
but I didn't-
non-profit agency,
But it's
so
quasi-city,
supposedly.
Yeah.
okay. So the motion is to give them permission on October 2nd and to waive the fees.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Set date for claims committee at about 230 Prospect Street in Florence Road.
Florence Road is the Faith Baptist Church issue that's been ongoing, and I haven't seen the letter yet, but my understanding is they're going to appeal your decision that we made last time. And the other one was Rocky Lococo, who you met last time, with his claim and the information we found out. We fixed our side of the problem. He still has 3 root balls on his side of the equation, so we just need to determine what we're going to do with that claim.
Okay. Can we split them up?
Sure.
Do Faith Baptist before the next meeting and move Rocky to the following?
Are we waiting for, until we get the letter from
I haven't seen the letter from Faith Baptist. I was told it was coming by Mr. Daggerin, who you met before with the pastor.
Douglas?
So let's do Rocky and then we'll do, so,
We'll do
Okay,
230 Prospect Street.
so
That's August 17th or something.
I
August.
believe that's our next board meeting.
Yes.
And then the first week in September for the other?
yes.
Okay.
Maybe 10 after 5.
5:10?
Yeah. Give it
5:10?
20 minutes for Faith.
Okay. For each?
No, just for Faith Baptist.
Oh.
A lot to talk
we're doing-
about.
We're doing Prospect Street first, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
what's after that one?
quarter after. I don't think,
Okay.
the church may take a little more discussion.
So the September.
And I'll remind you
September
too.
7th, is that right?
I've got my calendar
Second, is
with
it
me.
September 4th, right?
September 14th.
Yeah, okay.
September 7th, we cannot have anything September 7th.
What is that?
Did Terry sign that? No. Oh, that's out of control. Oh my God. You let it go by? I didn't, it should have bounced it right back.
Good spotting.
I reject it.
You know, it's only 7:30, isn't there something else we
Yeah.
can stay here for?
Oh, no.
I missed
We
it.
got page 2.
We still
The Red
have
Sox aren't
plenty.
playing.
We got
Oh,
page 2.
yeah, okay. My God.
You closed your book
Time to
too
do the
early.
second page. Didn't know that.
That's the first time that I can ever remember something.
All right, so we're all set on that. Sanitary sewer services policy, what time is it?
7:30.
7:30.
Oh, actually, I'm pretty good
And
to get
I would just like to point out that we are
Close.
we are 121, we are only 19 minutes behind, whereas before we started contracts, we were 50 minutes behind.
Wow, okay.
So we did good on contracts, guys.
All right, so I'm good here. Well, the sewer services policy is near and dear to my heart, but we could put it off until the next meeting.
Well, there's no sense in it because it's, I read through it, and you've approved everything.
Okay, so we
And
just,
it really, we should,
We should just rubber stamp it.
well, I don't think we should rubber
We
stamp
need to
it,
think
but
about every period and
certainly,
comma and
certainly, I think that what you've done in the last couple of meetings, and I didn't happen to be here for the last one, but it's good work, and it reads well. I think Ned's done a yeoman's job on this. I don't see any reason why we should hold it up.
all right. So do you move approval?
Second.
Any
Are you
further
happy with
discussion
it,
or
Ned?
questions?
I'm pleased with it.
Yeah,
The board is.
What I
If
thought.
the board's not, I'll rework it again.
It seems,
I think it covers the intent that we were looking for.
yeah.
Yeah.
I read it and it seemed, it certainly is what I'm thinking of on how the city should respond and what they should be responsible for and everything. And I think it's very good job.
Okay, thank you.
Can we see that something go on in the water bills with this? The ones-
That's
Yeah,
the
that's the
intention.
idea.
That's why I think we should move this along.
All right, well, all in favor of adopting this new policy, this amended policy?
Amended.
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent.
About 3 minutes.
Great, okay. Smear program is all set. Discussion about a committee to explore a reuse and recycling center.
That can really be combined with the next one.
Okay.
MJ, you wanna go?
Sure. As a result of our conversations, I think by convening this board and what came out of the recommendation of the Solid Waste Task Force, our little group that has been, originally was empowered to do education, has been moving forward and doing some exploration about grabbing this issue and doing some discussion about it, which you can see on the whiteboard behind you. We met this morning and started brainstorming about what a dream reuse recycling center might look like, and are continuing to do some thoughtful thinking and sharing around that issue, looking to put out a call for more people to step in and to participate in the committee. I think we sort of put out there what the gaps were and why we wanted to try to consolidate one point of pickup or one point of drop off for this, and heard about different places that are doing it in different ways. Like I said, we've got a small group of about 5 people. There is a plan for September 17th. It was originally going to be a rigid plastics pickup, but it seems to be expanding into a more...
It still will be rigid plastics, however.
It's expanding into sort of this, I think we ended up calling it like a reuse fair. So we're just moving forward on it. And
Now, is there anything we can do to help you get the more members that you're hoping for?
we're putting out a press release. It's up on the DPW blog. Our plans are to just to make it public out there. People need to submit an application. I think we're talking about delaying the applications until the September 17th or
Not, yeah,
And
in case
then-
anybody at the reuse fair.
and
Oh, yeah.
doing a survey for anybody who might come and participate in the September 17th day. about
And did
their
Mark
sense
from
of-
the Solid Waste Task Force, is he participating?
He wasn't there, but we should certainly put an invitation.
He would like to be a member, and Jesus.
Jesus is,
Yeah.
How about Ed Hagelstein?
not yet.
He certainly was here almost at every meeting asking for it at city council, and I haven't seen him lately, but he was very, very interested.
And we're writing a dream proposal, which I got my effort off today, and so now it's in David's hand. We're all collaborating on
Hagelstein
this,
is up
so.
on,
But,
now it took-
one of the concerns that MJ raised, and I'm gonna just jump right to it, is that even though the BPW said that we wanted to appoint this committee, which we are doing and we're in the process of doing it, the recommendations actually said city council and BPW should appoint the committee. So we didn't know if it needed to go to the, what's that, joint committee
Joint
meeting
committee.
and
The
get their
conference committee.
conference committee.
Yeah, good idea.
And just to make sure that they're all on board. And you're on that committee anyway, right? So,
So there's a request to put that on the agenda for next month's meeting?
Yeah, well, I actually spoke about it the other day, and they're aware that we were working on it, but I still think that more formalized involvement in making some decisions about creating this might be helpful.
So, I am all in favor of this kind of thing. My biggest fear is that in everyone's wish to get something started, that they're gonna locate something out in the yard here and it'll be a complete fiasco.
I nixed that today. I didn't nix it, but I did say that we have
Yeah.
concerns about that, and so it was not
Very
likely.
serious
It
concerns.
was not likely that it would happen on here, given all the solicitation discussion as well as the construction that may occur on that.
Yeah, we have, our vehicles in and out of here.
Right.
The general public that comes in and out of here.
And that,
But, and we talked about that, in fact, we talked
Yeah.
about other places where this might happen around town.
Really?
Yeah, that's, other venues and, probably talk with Terry Anderson to see what might be out there. So it can be part of a long-term concept and works out well. And I think the most critical thing is that we survey people who participate in this to see what the need is. You know, we were trying to identify what's the real gap, who are we trying to serve. And the committee was very animated about describing what they saw as the need. So it felt like a lot of good energy. But, and so we're doing this round robin sort
It's
of.
amazing, you know, the further out you live, the more you see of this, because people actually put good used things out on the curb and just leave them there, and people go by and pick them up.
They grew up
Yeah.
in New York.
Yeah. They grew up in New York. And I've seen some really nice things out, you know, that people just want to get rid of and put them out on the curb. They're gone in a few hours, you know.
And
I'm
nothing
amazed.
we do here will stop people from doing that.
Yeah.
If it works, don't fix it.
Yeah.
But I think the idea is that there seems to be a lot of stuff that could be
Oh, yeah,
shared or
there is.
repurposed or reused, and how do we
Yeah.
provide some means for people to do that in a.
I can agree with that.
So we're meeting
Okay.
again on August 17th, and we can give you an update that evening.
Oh, no, another
I
half
know.
day for the
Morning and
DPW.
night.
Well, we're glad you guys are doing that. I think I speak for everyone else.
I'm happy about it.
All right, the Mass DOT are next door.
I
Is
met
it
with-
ours?
Well, it's not ours. I met with the mayor last Thursday and with Al Stegman, who's the District 2 Director for Mass Highway or Mass DOT. Claire would, or the mayor would like us to move forward with the purchase of the property. Basically, to keep you up to date on it, basically the state came back with a $0, or actually $100 fee to transfer the land to us. With it become a number of obligations though that we were concerned about. There's a landfill next door. I don't really call it landfill. The state has said it's a landfill. It needs to be capped. It's street sweepings, concrete debris, brick debris, things of that nature. There's also a building next door that is unusable going forward, so at some point that would have to be demolished. And the other part of the transfer is to build Mass DOT a new salt shed. That money is already in place and has been in place for a number of years, trying to sort this whole land transfer out. So there are some obligations that the city would undertake. The mayor does want it to become city property. She thinks it would be a fine addition to the DPW facility here. But I just want to bring up to date. She's asked that I move it forward, and with it, I'll start working with our legal counsel as to the, all the items that will be listed in the release of the property to us. There's a number of issues to deal with next door.
I envision, if we take that property, I envision this to be without recycling center one day, and there to be just a DPW site with recycling all down below the hill, and do what was already designed by the Smith College students, and put in a full-fledged recycling center down there. I would love to see that. You know, that's a great project.
So their appraiser came out and put a value of around $460,000 was the value of the property, but to cap the landfill was a $200,000 item, and demolish the building was $80,000, and in fact they're buying them
How much to cap?
at $225,000, I believe it was. And he came up with all these decreasing dollar values of the property. And basically came out that it's worth nothing if the city wants to take it.
But that's because there'd be $460,000 in costs in order to do that.
Exactly.
And the capital improvement budget is $80,000 or something?
Capital improvements put $75,000 towards the salt shed, and the solid waste enterprise fund for a number of years has set aside $75,000 to help that, because it was always the thought that we would build a transfer station down below. The deed also came back originally that would be only used for a transfer station. We were able to get DCAM to change that so it's for any municipal use. So it's not just dedicated to it, could be used for any municipal use going forward.
But what's the possibility of getting grant money to help with the capping and everything else?
I don't know.
You know, that would be,
That would be zero,
you think so, huh?
non-existent.
Is the landfill an awkward spot?
It's surrounded by wetlands.
It's awkward.
There's a stream that runs through the property that's been piped, and that solid waste area is right next to it.
So we'd never put even parking there.
Well, we had talked about at one point doing an alternate cap on it, that we actually might, part of the capping being put bituminous on top of it, so we could use it for parking or for storage. The other idea that was discussed is we have an operating landfill right now. Can we move that waste up to the existing landfill, and therefore there is no liability going forward with post-closure requirements for the next 30 years?
And so we'll study that.
Yes.
And would it make any sense to think about putting the salt shed up by our salt shed? Letting them use the back door, and just to kind of clean the slate down there so we could really...
The idea was that they would always retain about a 1.8 acre parcel for themselves. That is their emergency reserve or salt for this area. So it gets used when they run out at their other sites. This is kind of their backup site here, and they didn't want to lose that facility. However, the existing salt shed is right smack dab in the middle of everything down there, and would be not conducive to us in the future if we wanted to do something there. And that's why the obligation, they wanted a new salt shed built.
So you don't think they'd be willing to accept the same salt shed out and back here?
Become our emergency reserve.
Occasionally the truck might make a mistake and go to the wrong one.
Your mind is always working, Mike.
Their contractors come in at all hours that would not match up with our hours here, but I mean, if I could explore that with them and see if we'd be willing that we would take over the entire site. That hasn't been the discussion so far.
I haven't seen any of the conceptual drawings, whether a salt shed, I mean, I assume they want it kind of toward the front.
There's a pendant area right now, a fenced-in area where they kept some drainage pipe. They used to keep signal lights and things of that nature. And that's the area that they're looking at. If you look at the site, it's to the left.
Yeah.
Is what they want to keep.
It's kind of up front.
It is.
How big is the site overall?
Roughly 8 acres.
How big is this site?
About 8 acres, 6 acres I think this site is. 7 acres. I have to look at the map.
How big is the wetland?
Fairly large.
Like 7 acres?
No. Wetlands are more tucked towards the backside. There
Yeah,
actually
you can
used
see
to be
it
an
from
ice
like
pond
that.
back there years ago. And when that was breached, the wetlands have formed down in that lower area, down the far back corner.
Jim, why do you say that you think there's no chance of getting state funds for clearing out the, for capping the landfill? Because they don't have any money, or because there's something wrong with the landfill?
There
or-
are no grant programs right now for
Okay.
landfill cap.
So it's not
projects.
anything intrinsic to the nature of that, it's because there's no money?
That's right.
Oh, okay, so that could change. That could change in your lifetime.
Not mine.
Notice I didn't say mine either, Jim.
All right, Gary, is there anything that you had hoped we would talk about tonight that we didn't talk about?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Anything on your phone there you'd like to share?
I want to put in our August meeting. Is it the 17th?
Yeah.
One time in August. Thank you.
I'm all set, thank you.
All set.
DJ?
How's our water flow doing?
Thank you.
I forgot I was gonna ask that.
Whether or not we're gonna face water restrictions? still?
Friday,
No.
you will get a phone call at your house from the city telling you that we are implementing a water restriction.
Oh, we are.
Above and beyond the water restriction we already have?
We have one right now.
Oh, we
We
do?
don't, we
No.
haven't. We've been watering openly and wanted.
You better hurry and go wash your car.
That's right.
Water your
Oh, well.
garden.
I had a backhoe digging up a trench for some landscape lighting we're putting in over in Amherst. And we ripped up one of the control wires on the sprinkler system. And the guy gave me an earful while he was fixing the wires about our water restriction policy. He recognized me.
The trials and tribulations of being well known.
He says he's lost 6-8 customers, potential customers, this summer alone because of water restrictions and the fact that people can't use a sprinkler system. And he wondered whether policy couldn't become somewhat more nuanced, where, you know, we...
If the state has their way, there won't be any sprinklers in the Commonwealth. I mean, that's how bad it is. A few months ago, I was at a Mass Waterworks meeting in Taunton, and one of the presenters actually was somebody that sells automated sprinkler systems, and there's all kinds of technology now about feedback on water levels and all types of like really expensive, crazy sprinkler systems that are out there. I asked the guy, I said, you know, if other towns have the same type of permit that we have in Northampton, all that type of technology that's available is irrelevant, because under our permit with the state, you can't have automated sprinkler use when you're in a water restriction. And I made that point, and he wasn't understanding what I was saying, but the guy in Boston that wrote our permit was sitting at the next table over, and I was looking at him, and he didn't say anything.
Oh, no,
they're writing permits, and if you talk to them on the phone, they'll tell you, and they've told Dave Sparks the same thing, that if they have their way, eventually they don't want any sprinkler. They think it's a waste of water. I mean, that's basically the direction they're headed.
Jimmy?
Well, yeah, one of the things that really bothers me is the way they set water restrictions in this city. You know, what they're going by. If anybody had known that this thing that they put in the Mill River years ago was going to determine how or whether or not we could use water, you bet your life that it wouldn't have been there. But that isn't what they said they were using it for. It's completely irrelevant to the water system itself.
It's a different watershed, right?
Yeah.
This is really a statewide issue where there are a number of water suppliers that have stream gauges and things that the state's trying to use, you know, as a means to determine water restrictions. They're having, you know, different problems on the Cape where, you know, the state's trying to come up with a way to implement water restrictions that don't really make sense.
I would think
there's a lot of discussion about it right now.
that we would get a hold of our political people and say to them, look, water supply is setting up something that's completely irrelevant. And you're the politician that's allowing them to get away with it. Can't you guys do something? I mean, I'd be on Stan Rosenberg's neck and Peter Colcott's neck about this kind of thing.
There's actually pending state legislation that might have more of an impact in terms of more restrictions on water use from water suppliers. And there's a lot of push from the environmental community and different lobbying groups from the environmental side that are pushing to restrict water suppliers even more in the amount of withdrawals that they use. Just a week or so ago, there was a hearing on Beacon Hill about pending legislation, and I wasn't able to go to that particular session, but about 40 water suppliers and the Mass Waterworks Association went into Boston to express concern about restrictions on proposed legislation that would restrict water withdrawals from water suppliers. And it's all getting back to concern about levels in the rivers, Charles River, Ipswich, other rivers that are having problems with the volume of water in the summertime. And it's being blamed on water withdrawals, but there's a lot of other scientific information that's coming out now that's showing that it's not actually water withdrawals that are, you know, that's impacting some of these low levels in the streams. So it seems like the lobbying and the legislation is a little bit further ahead than the science is, and the organization of some of the rivers groups and other groups, they seem to be more well organized and funded than public water suppliers. So they tend to get the ear of the Stan Rosenbergs and Pierre Cocottes a little bit easier than the water suppliers do. And I think that's something that the water suppliers and communities are trying to do is to get a larger voice in the discussion about how water is allocated and what the restrictions are and why they should be in place or not in place, or what is that balance between public water supply use and the amount of stream flow.
Jim, what would be an example of water withdrawal?
So all the water that we take from our wells or from our reservoirs are considered water withdrawal. So on average, it's about 3.1 million gallons a day for the city is our sort of average water withdrawal. In the summertime, that number can go up to over 4 million gallons a day. But we're withdrawing water from the environment and using it for water supply purposes.
And so what you're saying is that but what you're saying is that so the water withdrawal is affecting the amount of flow in our streams?
That's what the state's saying. That
That's
the
what
more,
the state's saying.
Yeah, but in our case, the water restriction, there's not a direct relationship between the permit requirement for water restriction and the status of our water supply. For example, we're anticipating on Friday we're going to issue a water restriction. I looked at the reservoir levels this morning, and I think the Ryan is spilling, West Whately I think is spilling, and Mountain Street's down like half a foot. So in terms of our capacity, for the city supply, we're actually in pretty good shape right now because it's been so wet. But in terms of our permit and the stream flow requirements that we have to use to gauge a water restriction, we have to implement a water restriction. So there's not a real relationship there between those two. And a lot of other communities are in the same boat. Some communities have the option of using a stream gauge like we do. Some communities just they opt to use a calendar restriction. So in the spring through the fall, they're in a permanent restriction because they don't want to deal with the stream flow or whatever. So it could be a very rainy year, it could be tons of rain all the time, and they're still in a water restriction because of the way their permit's written.
Well, at the risk of alienating just several years ago on your previous previous tenure on the board, you were saying we should look into long-term water supply, and that's something that's really important for us. So in a way, I see this as an alternative to looking for sources of water that may or may not be available, even though I agree with you that maybe it's somewhat artificial, the measurement of the flow, but still, it is a way of conserving water.
Well, it certainly is.
Yeah.
The future for us of developing more water is also being restricted by the fact that the state now says to us, well, you can't go out and investigate for water supply. You got to do it regionally. We want you to do it for everybody around us too.
Yeah.
And they're getting more and more ridiculous. When the city can't fend for itself, something's wrong. I don't know. I get very, very frustrated when it comes to the fact of limiting our waters. As Ned says, we've got the Ryan is overflowing. The Whately is overflowing, and one of them is down a foot.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I'm just
crazy.
throwing out another.
No, I understand what you're saying too, and I can understand that. But they're really pushing it.
Sorry that sprinkler got pulled in Amherst, Terry.
Well, I'll tell him to don't hold
You
his
might
breath.
tell him to look for another
This guy. All right.
Dig you a well.
So David, that was comes from you, MJ, not
Can I
David.
ask a second question?
Well, the last one's pretty good. Go ahead.
Just a question, there had been a farmer here who was interested in the land adjacent to the landfill up on Glendale Road.
Oh, yes.
Did we ever move forward anywhere with that?
No, because we were waiting for that.
Last time that I remember, the board wanted to wait till the landfill closed before they decided what they wanted to do with the property.
Mr. Ernest.
David, do you have anything interesting, like MJ's two excellent questions?
I want to, is it my turn?
Yes.
I want to thank MJ on the ads, that was really huge, and I want to thank you guys that looked at the SEA consultants.
There's some mumbling going on now.
Yeah, I'm hearing it
Someone's
too.
birthday or something?
In your packages tonight, there was a brief report on effective utility management that we received from
Cadmus Group.
Group. That was the session that we did a little while ago in June, and David Sherry participated in that, and this was just kind of a synopsis of the findings. So just remembered that I had asked BJ to hand it out, and she told me that it was all set.
So any particular points of pride from this? Any particular points of pride?
We feel like we're doing a great job. In summary.
This was done on us?
Yes.
Oh. Well, I will.
Actually, it was a great working session being facilitated by them, and it actually gave staff a chance to sit back and really think and discuss what we're doing on a day-to-day basis here.
Okay, perhaps an adjournment motion?
I would like to move to the adjournment.
Excellent.
Oh, we still got time.
Okay.
Second.
If you're